Hello, GM, or good morning, everybody. I'm your host, Keenan. Welcome to the March 10th, 2022 weekly DXdao Community Call. Today, we're going to be chatting all about DXD volume and the buyback, upcoming swapper farming allocations, the codeless conduct hackathon recaps, and DX Amsterdam. As usual, you can follow along with the agenda in the Mothership text channel here above this voice channel. I believe John put it in today. Thank you, John. But before we kick things off, I'd like to call quick attention to the DXdao annual recap thread, which was posted on DAO Talk late last week. A great collection of kind of DXDAO's accomplishments, outlooks, and really contextualize what we're kind of aiming for in this coming year. So I'm just going to drop a link in the chat here as well. Would highly recommend taking a look through this here on the call. Yeah, excellent. But let's kick things off here with some recaps, starting with governance. I believe, Dave, actually, you've been kind of running the governance calls here lately. Would you like to give a quick governance recap?
Sure. So overall, I guess there's everything moving ahead well. We have a couple of proposals live on Xdao, mostly buybacks and contributor proposals, but kind of overlapping, I guess, the governance and Treasury update. We also have some more test proposals from our multi-calls live on Gnosis chain. So we're actually testing some unpooled proposals of LP tokens on Swapper from the DAO. So kind of trying to do that through the multi-calls. Other than that, it's mostly payments on Gnosis chain at the moment. We do have two proposals on mainnet as well. One of them is actually to withdraw DXD from the GPV1 relayer. So given that we're not doing buybacks anymore on mainnet, and this weekend there was a nice opportunity to submit those at a low gas price, we went ahead and submitted those. So there's a request withdrawal proposal and then one actual withdrawal proposal. That's just due to the nature of how GPV1 works. And there's also a sponsorship proposal for the Global Governance Gathering, I believe it's called, which is an event hosted by the Daoist at DevConnect the first 2 days. That's pretty much a brief overview of what's going on the governance side. And yeah, not sure if I won't go further, so I'll stick to Keenan's agenda.
Yeah, makes sense. And if you have anything extra to kind of add, we do have the open section. Of course, we can talk about anything. Cool. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the Treasury in general. I guess this is kind of Dave as well. We do have buyback discussion right after this, so maybe just a quick little contextualization of the Treasury would be nice as well. Sorry to keep you up here.
Sure. So I guess generally looking at the Treasury, the main kind of things we have right now is we actually have a large amount of capital on Gnosis chain. So if you're checking the Treasury, you might have noticed that. And that actually comes back to the proposal aforementioned about unpooling funds. So before we're looking to deposit further funds into Swapper, into the Xdao WEF pair. And before doing that, we just, as a regular check, we want to unpool just some test funds to make sure everything works correctly. And we did run into some issues due to the way we were calling the unpool and due to some permissions. So actually, when you provide liquidity to a swapper pool from the DAO for a relayer, you just need to do a provision proposal. But when you withdraw them, because there's also a withdrawal happening, to actually execute that withdrawal, you need a separate proposal, which not only the first one doing the removal of liquidity, but you also need a second one executing that removal. Due to the fact that tokens are being withdrawn, only the DAO can do that. So that's why we currently have a couple of test proposals up on Gnosis chain. But as soon as those pass, and we're very confident that everything will work, it's really just a regular check to make sure everything works as intended. We'll then provision the liquidity that currently sits in the Gnosis chain Treasury. That's why we have a significant amount of funds there. And in fact, we'll probably likely already do another movement of topping up the funds on Gnosis chain, knowing that the majority of the Xdao and WEF currently in the Treasury will go to Swapper, depending on the price of WEF. Of course, we'll have to see how that works out. And I'm actually also currently working on a very brief blog post about an update on kind of like the staking of ETH we've done so far, hoping to publish that tomorrow. And just to give an overview of the different staking options we went for. So we went, of course, with Lido, Stakewise, and Rocket Pool. And, just want to give a brief overview of, how it works out for the Treasury from the tokenomics perspective. And also just give a brief update on how everyone can check kind of the performance. So some of them it's easier to check, some of them less so. So looking to have a blog post up about that. And then hoping to also move forward with a proposal about staking further funds across the platforms. Or, that's something we'll have to decide on and will probably be discussed on the forum post as well as in the following calls. And yeah, just kind of like slowly sliding into the buybacks. The buybacks have also been live and running quite well over the past few months, so we're cranking those out. And in fact, we're also looking to get a new buyback extension proposal up on the forum, which will also, of course, move some more funds, particularly ETH, which will be wrapped to WEF and then moved over to Gnosis and deposited into the buyback free layer. And then I think this is a good interlude for Chris to maybe give a brief update about the volume, which he's very passionate about and on top of.
They call that a professional segue in the business. Very well done, Dave. So I posted a bi-weekly volume update. I'm going to try to do these consistently, for this year, so every 2 weeks. So kind of an interesting development. There was a really good 2 weeks in terms of volume, $120,000 of average volume on chain the last 2 weeks. I think most people might be aware of this. There was a day that there was a lot of activity. Someone dumped, I think, like 100 DXD on Arbitrum in like a single transaction, and then that led to a bunch of other, DXD holders coming in and kind of scooping that up. I think that was like a week and a half ago. So we actually had a very big week in terms of volume, but the average volume for 3 months basically stayed the same, and that's because these 2 weeks are replacing 2 weeks at the end of November that were also very, very high volume there. So I think that the volume will increase, the 3 month volume will increase, and therefore the size of the DXD buyback purchase size once we don't have the mid-December, end of December time period where there was a lot of low volume, because that's still driving down our overall 3 month average. So yeah, I think so obviously that'll stop counting when we hit April there. So that should show a boost to the overall 3 month average there. In terms of where most of the volume in the last 2 weeks was on Arbitrum, about 55% on Arbitrum compared to 25% on Gnosis chain and only 6% on mainnet. There was a pretty big increase in the on-chain extra. This is a nice big shout out to Connor for following all of the on-chain extra activity that's going on in terms of the different trades that are happening, mostly through one inch limit. So the last 2 weeks, there was actually, I think it was like $150,000 of trades that came through on-chain extra there. I think this is the address that was selling them there. So yeah, and then just kind of two other things maybe related to volume or DXD buyback stuff. One is building off of what Dave was saying in terms of that DXD return proposal that's on mainnet. So that would be a proposal that would bring in 1,999 DXD, just short of 2,000. 1999 was a great year, by the way. But that, I think, and maybe we can push and ask CoinGecko for that. I'm pretty sure that should automatically lower the circulating supply for DXD, because then that DXD will no longer be in the relayer where CoinGecko thinks that it's out on the open market, but will actually be in DXdau's Treasury, which CoinGecko actually already has already. So that could be an interesting development there. And then the second thing in terms of DXD trade volume or kind of DXD liquidity in general is there are some discussions, and I think not yet a proposal, about increasing the swap fee on the DXD ETH pairs on Gnosis chain and Arbitrum. And I think there was some ranges we could select. The broad consensus was to potentially increase the swap fee. Now, of course, this would potentially limit the amount of volume on these pools because the swap fee is now higher, but then that might mean that LPs and the protocol fee, meaning DXdao itself, would actually get more revenue from that. Caney Fork is an LP on Swapper for DXdETH. Been doing that for over a year on all three chains, and so I'm definitely as a Caney Fork is definitely in support of increasing the swap fee because I think it is something that does affect the kind of impermanent loss of those LPs. And if you look at the liquidity that's out there, especially on mainnet, I think a lot of DXD holders are not willing to put up liquidity because the fees aren't there enough in terms of generating that. One of the most popular places for DXD liquidity, actually the most popular place for DXD liquidity outside of Swapper, is the balancer pool that, yes, does have an 80-20 mix, but it also has a 0.6% swap fee, which I think does help in terms of limiting some of the impermanent loss there. But I think broadly speaking, I think it's something to experiment with. This is something that's actually unique about Swapper there, but it would be keen to get any DXD holders' opinions, any DXD WEF LPs, make sure and voice your opinion there. I'll share the link to it. Yeah, I guess that's it for kind of DXD trade volume.
Interesting comment by Connor in the text chat here about limiting the ability of people to manipulate the oracle. So like that liquidity providing relayer that was mentioned earlier, these like buyback relayers are checking for price on like just before the execution through people calling the contract. Just a thought that if it looks like it's an issue that people are trying to manipulate it, we can also play with the spacing between the Oracle updates, which could make it a little harder to maintain any kind of manipulation.
Yeah, I like that. And I think when we're thinking about these manipulations, we want to build structures or systems where we're not like preventing the manipulation, but basically making it like, I feel like okay for other arbitrageurs to come in and like take advantage of someone trying to manipulate that. So like in that case, like John's describing, like if you extend that period out to say 10 minutes or so, but also literally like profit from it is by putting orders on Mesa that are irrespective maybe of just what's on Gnosis chain, but like what the liquidity and what the DXdETH price is on the other chains there. And so that you would know that you would be you could have an arbitrage opportunity on this, even if the swapper DXdETH pool on Gnosis chain is manipulated. And so I think, yeah, thinking of those types of ways we can incentivize like market players to come in and like drive the behavior. I'll listen to lo-fi what Connor is typing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for the recap here. As always, open any questions here at the end of any particular segment. Feel free to jump on the stage or message in the chat. Was just going to comment, the use of the word keen really throws me off. And I heard you say it before John stepped up, and it made me do a double take.
Not too keen on that?
I'm not too keen on the use of keen.
Oh,
no, I'm joking.
Great.
I love it.
I get why you're. Yeah, no, it makes sense. And just one other thing. The other thing that I think does, it could both limit some of the ability to manipulate, but it would limit the arbitrageurs' like desire to come in after. Is if we do increase the swap fee, that is like a small increase on that manipulation, right? So they would lose a little bit when they push the price up because there would be a higher fee. But then the downside is, of course, that you would be disincentivizing arbitrageurs to be coming in and like trying to arbitrage that pool once it got above a certain amount because the swap fee is higher.
Cool. Thank you again. We'll pay attention to any questions, comments here. We can always circle back on the topic if anything shows up in the chat. But for now, let's segue again to Swapper farming and a bit on the allocations for March 17th, next Thursday at 1500 UTC. News is there isn't really a large allocation shift. Most of the allocations on both Gnosis and Arbitrum are now quite stable, and we are quite happy with their performance. There are a couple of underperformers, but it's generally the newer pairs that haven't had as much time to simmer. And when we kind of took a look at them, it was only a couple weeks after the initial introduction of the farm. So there isn't actually any percentage allocation shifts on neither Arbitrum nor Gnosis chain at this time. The one kind of bigger pair changes, H&D against Wheat has been shifted to H&D against XDAI and will be incentivized in a joint campaign with the H&D team. That can be expected on March 23rd, slightly after next week. That is because they have their own H&D release schedule that is currently live on Swapper, which you can also find on Gnosis chain. Another interesting facet of these campaigns is obviously the carrots. As you may or may not have known, carrots were introduced last epoch, epoch 10 and 11 on Gnosis chain. And they introduced for some Swapper rewards and from some GNO rewards as well. The current status of those carrot rewards is they're targeting a TVL of the total Swapper on Gnosis chain of anywhere from 10 to 30 million US dollars. There's been a bit of a market downturn, and we've spent a lot of time around the $9 to $10 million area. I suspect at this stage that these campaigns will not pay out very much or at all. And we've kind of made some adjustments to reflect that in these coming campaigns, namely the GNO allocation and Swapper allocations have been shifted from 10 to 30 million TVL to 7 to 15 million TVL. So it should be much more attainable and pay out some rewards regardless. But it is also worth noting that we've protected some of these rewards, the GNO rewards, as we haven't reached the targets, which is very interesting, and can presumably extend those GNO rewards going forward and distribute some more. So lots of fun stuff to look forward to on Gnosis chain. And I think that does actually encapsulate most of the changes. You can look forward to these farms going up next Thursday at 1500 UTC, March 17th. Cool. And that brings us to our next topic, which is codeless conduct, talking a bit about the recap and submissions. Obviously, the submission window has now ended, and maybe Chris can give some context on this.
I really thought I was done with the DXD stuff, only because I was like, I wouldn't have talked as much about that if I was going to talk more about this. But codeless conduct is a great to talk about because it is a cool initiative to try to bring more people into Web3 that maybe do not have technical skills to contribute to a traditional hackathon. So Dxdao sponsored this and also sponsored 3 bounties, one on real governance memes and one on a Swapper tokenomics proposal, and then one on a creating a video for a couple different topics like holographic consensus, multi-chain. Still coming through all of the submissions, but in terms of the number of people, we actually had, I think, pretty good participation in the number of people. So as you said, we had the three bounties, and so the one that was most popular was this create a series of DXdao real governance memes. You can actually click through that and see see all of the bounties themselves. But we actually had I think 11 applicants and I think 8 submissions I think to that one. And then with the tokenomics proposal, we had actually 2 submissions to it. I will say like one not super great, but one kind of interesting and really did like think through some of the ideas about introducing VE curve style governance, and also like in terms of like having a protocol fee that's governable by different projects. So that's one that's interesting there. And then the videos I think are a little bit more challenging. We had some that were maybe too long and some that it's tough to have that level of video production. I have not had it. I think there were 3 submissions there. Let me find this again. For the video one. And yeah, so we'll have to decide kind of which one of these we award. I think the memes one, we're feeling pretty confident we'll award one of them there. And then the video one, maybe a little bit tougher. That's an $1,000 bounty one there. And then, yeah, the Swapper ones is probably, as I think Nathan's sharing in the chat there, is probably one that we could have the most input on if that's maybe something worth awarding the $500 bounty. I'm trying to reload this and it's not. It thinks I'm a bot. Oh, select pictures of stairs. I got it right.
It's just to me.
Not a robot.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Not
I had
stairs.
my doubt.
It's like there is like actually just one picture is a picture of one stair or a set of stairs that was just divided into 9 pictures. It wasn't even like a bunch of different stairs. But anyway, this is the last link I wanted to share here. And yeah, click through the memes. I'm trying to figure out a way to save them all because they're all like saved through Gitcoin. So GitHub. So it's actually pretty hard to like look at all of them at once. So like here's one submission. Yeah, and here's another one, but they're all so it's that's not. Yeah, it is. So yeah, we'll comb through these, share some of them in the memes channel. Nathan was, I'd say, lukewarm on the memes, but I think that's because he has a very high standard for meme production and is always kind of raising the bar to new levels. But I think there's some kind of fun things there, and actually a lot of content that we will have. So yeah, I guess that's codeless conduct.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. I did have some questions here. They were answered, I believe. Actually, this one maybe wasn't. Should we expect more non-technical bounties from DXdao?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think we haven't yet had like a debrief on how this works, right? Like whether it's worth our time. I think there is, I guess, broadly speaking, when we think of like hackathons or things, I think there's a desire to do more, but also a realization that they do take time and like commitment. So I think this one was good, at least for experimenting and building a brand. And I think like if codeless conduct is doing these things in the future, I think it makes sense for Dxdao to participate, just given we've already established that relationship and we know how things work. But I think that hopefully this kind of is kickstarted, maybe not kickstarted, but it's running in parallel with another development in Dxdao area, which is kind of just funding more initiatives like this, whether that's through a hackathon or whether it's through Initiative DAO. So we'd actually had the idea for the ENS video based on some of the work that Nathan or Arhat, I don't know if I want to be giving him credit, but I'm not sure if everyone, that Arhat has done to fund some of those videos. And I think we should be much more aggressive about like creating those bounties and looking for people that kind of build these little things. And I think most of that may happen through the Initiative DAO. But yeah, I think maybe hackathons are another good area for it.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you very much, Chris. Let's move on here to DX Amsterdam. It would be great to give a little bit of context about the events, kind of our goals, obviously visiting Amsterdam and kind of being around. I do believe Sky is here in the audience. Would you be around to give some context?
And if Sky can't make it, I can probably get in. I think he may be traveling.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So Dev Connect is sort of the banner name for a week of events kind of being prompted by the Ethereum Foundation. So, same organizers, kind of same organization that is behind DevCon. Now it's been a couple of years since we've had a DevCon due to lockdowns, but this year later, I think it's DevCon 6 now is planned for Bogota. But this is something that I think they envision as kind of an intermediary or like another opportunity for folks to get together. It's in Europe as opposed to the Americas. So just giving some, like trying to prompt more opportunities for events. And so there's some cool stuff popping up. Like they're all independent events. If somebody, I can post the schedule here in the chat. And I think the ones, thanks, Nathan, me to it. But one we're looking at sponsoring, and I think this was covered in previous calls, GGG. Why is it called GGG again? Maybe Keenan, you might remember. But it's the Daoist hosting a 2-day event that's going to be all about DAOs. So I think it's a great opportunity for DXdao to do some networking amongst peers and also kind of get some attention on what we do well and what we have expertise in around governance and decentralized organization and all the stuff that we're always talking about. And then later that week, there's some other cool events. There's a bunch of ones that I'm particularly interested in are Layer 2 Amsterdam. I think that's going to be a good opportunity to stay current on this very busy and important space that's influencing scalability, and I think is potentially the future of blockchain, right? So we're looking at optimistic rollups, CK rollups, and I think a lot of them will be there in Amsterdam. There's also a lot of stuff happening kind of at the Ethereum protocol layer. I might not go to some of these. There's just too many events to attend them all, but staking events and MEV protection, I might try to catch that one, I think is on Friday. There's also ETH Amsterdam. I think this is the first in-person hackathon organized by ETH Global since pre-pandemic. I think I went to the last one they organized in London. That was just before EthCC in 2020. These are premier hackathon events, great experiences. They provide, food and everything the hackers can need from the moment they walk in on Friday till the judging happens on Sunday. So I'm planning to apply to this. We're not sponsoring this one since we're focusing on the Daoist, but I think it'll be a cool event. And then, there's a bunch of other stuff like a DeFi day on Monday, I think, as well. And in addition to that, I think DXdao will probably be sending a couple of contributors to go meet up with the Copenhagen Flames, which is the esports team that was recently sponsored by DXdao. They are close by in Copenhagen, so I think some of us taking advantage of the proximity to go meet with them in person and of course, talk about the potential interest they might have in Web3 and DAOs and the stuff that DXdao could help them with and be interested in. So, that's kind of the broad gist of it. I think it'll be a great opportunity to get Ethereum heads together in Europe and also, think about kind of the more technical stuff as well, a lot of focus on protocol development, ETH2, proof of stake, layer 2s, all that good stuff. So I'm excited for it, and I think a handful of contributors are planning to attend, and if anybody else from the community is around, give us a shout. It would be great to connect.
Yeah, thank you, John. And for anyone listening to the recording, Global Governance Gathering is the name of the GGG event by the Daoists. We do have one question here in the comments and one left with me before, just starting with Concordians here in the Discord. Is anyone aware whether the Amsterdam event will be accessible virtually?
So they are all independent events, right? So I imagine many of them probably will, although I don't actually know about any of them, but I would suspect that many of the organizers would be trying to provide access virtually to their content and talks, I would imagine. But I think you'd have to go look on a case-by-case basis to see if that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. I suspect there's going to be a lot of live streams and everything. I mean, the Daoist is very likely to have some virtual content as well. The other question I have is, are there going to be any DXdao events in Amsterdam? I do believe this is more of an individual basis kind of event for DXdao, but maybe, John, you can have some context on that as well.
Sure, yeah, no, I think there was some thought and discussion about whether DXdao could host something related to governance or DAOs or our products. But I think where the Daoist is got an event kind of up our alley around DAOs and governance and stuff, we decided to just kind of throw our support behind that event as the most kind of practical approach. In addition, I'm sure the contributors will be carving out some time to get some meetings together and some work done and some orientation around our objectives with the networking, recruiting, and that kind of thing as well. But beyond that, no, I don't think we have any formal DXdao event thing. Maybe something spontaneous could happen, like a little bit of an evening event or something if people are interested, but no conferences or anything like that planned from DXdao.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. I'm once again open to any questions here in the chat. Anything about Amsterdam, anything about in general, just kind of moving on to open question segment now. I actually do not have anything left with me, but one thing I'd like to call attention to is there's a bit of a larger Discord kind of overhaul that's been going through and or has gone through a lot of stuff in the back end surrounding verification that might not be visible here on kind of the front page of our Discord. But the primary thing is the verification role can now be administered through wallet verification. So when you join the DXdao Guild, you'll also get a verification role as well. So you can do that instead of the CAPTCHA, which is super interesting. And we're also, of course, a little bit closer with Agora now and using that for our verification instead of Collab Land. So if you connect, I believe I'll drop the link in the chat here. If it will let me. Here we go. If you head to the rules and info chat under the server header, there's a Guild XYZ bot that has a link for DXdao verified holders. You can verify your wallet there and get the verified role if you don't already have it, which you do if you're in this call. But it will also give you access to the DXD and or swapper holder channels. And in those holder channels, interesting for those in this call that have verified, there's new holder role channels. You can select manually what icon to show next to your name. So you can choose either the DXdao logo or the swapper logo based on which you have verified in the chat. So you can see my name in the chat here is the DXdao logo next to it. So you can have that if you have verified your holdings. So highly recommend doing that. There's going to be a bit of a formal announcement with all of the changes, but that's kind of the fun little community one here I wanted to share. Awesome. Just opening the door for any open questions. I did not have any left with me. I do see a couple of people typing, so we'll give a quick window for that. Otherwise, we can end 10 minutes or so early.
I would draw attention to some of the conversation this morning in the general chat. I thought it was pretty interesting, both the potential liquidity incentives for cow token and that forum discussion. Good to go in there and weigh in. I think I'm still in the process of reading it, but it would be great to advocate for DXdao there. And then there was also some discussion about these massive funds being announced recently, and how interestingly a lot of what they're talking about is like DAO tooling and DAO related infrastructure and decentralization infrastructure. So kind of thinking some thoughts on that, and keeping an eye on all this money.
Yeah, why don't we? I wanted to reply to that when I saw that, because I had because like with all of these big funds being raised, right? And like I mean, Bain 560 million was the latest one this week. Electric had $1 billion, but like I mean, A16Z is closing in on a $4.5 billion fund, and it's like the question is like literally, where the F are those funds going to go? Like, where are they going to put that amount of money in things? And especially like, as we're saying, they're talking about like DAO stuff. And I think it'll be really interesting how the funds are deployed between like equity projects and token projects, right? This has kind of always been like a tension, or I guess like a choice between doing a fundraiser here. But I think a lot of these projects are like gearing, like right now, there's probably an overvaluation in equity valuations like that VCs are investing into, because that's really all a lot of this like new VC money can go into, because actually a lot of them cannot go onto the open market and just like start like buying tokens from some random project. Like the only thing you do see a little bit, for instance, is like A16Z buying Lido, for instance, and like they're buying like staked ETH for that. But a lot of these are not super flexible where they can like just go out and buy tokens like on the open market. It's more about like funding new project entrepreneurs that can do that. Maybe there will be some ability to do this in terms of like what people used to call Treasury diversification proposals, which is, treasuries selling their own tokens for stable coins or something else. And that's a way that they're funding it. But just from like an investment perspective, I think there's so much more opportunity now in terms of valuations in tokens or like token-based projects, tokens that are like already liquid, just because so much of the new money is like being funneled in through these like, very traditional kind of like equity-backed companies. And just because they're able to be able to take in that much money. I think Alchemy is the best example of this. Alchemy is like an Infura provider. It's like a typical SaaS company, and it's got like just a crazy valuation because it's kind of like your typical Silicon Valley company that can just take in a lot of funding. I will stop here and say that like part of this argument is very much taken from a podcast I was listening to this morning with it's via Unchained and Laura Shin. I'll to it, but it's actually got I think it's called Around the Chopping Block, but it's got
I like the chopping block.
It's like, I'm not in the mood for new podcasts. I was like super skeptical of just like people talking, but like it's good, right? So just it's Tarun from Gauntlet and Robert from Compound, and then Hasib and what's his face, Tom from Dragonfly, and they were kind of like talking about some of these things with the big fundraise there.
Yeah, one of my favorite podcasts as of late. I think that's definitely give that a listen. And yeah, I mean, you see these valuations just really swelling, and it's almost like just all this capital has come in the crypto, and like where does it go? Is there like enough deal flow opportunity for this money? And like you said, I think they're kind of restricted. It was interesting. I don't know. Did you see, Chris? I think it was Frank from the block tweeting about it, but saying that the Bain Capital announcement was actually mentioning specifically liquid tokens. Now, it was a little unclear to like what extent they would be pursuing liquid tokens, but even just them mentioning it, I think was sort of interesting.
I think you can. Basically, it's just it's not the ideal structure. So like it's a little bit more onerous in how you're like funding things. And so like they could structure these things differently where they're a little bit more hedge fundy, but like being a venture fund does not preclude them or prevent them from doing those liquid tokens. It's just like a little bit harder.
It's not really how they're set up or what their mission is. How they're typically doing it.
Here it is.
And then when you look at like this Electric Capital, I encourage everybody in the DXdao community to read this Electric Capital blog announcement, because it was really striking to me how much of what they were talking about like sort of resonates with what we do. And I'm kind of, my reaction was like, hey, like DXdao is experts in this stuff. And they're apparently sending, like lining up $1 billion to funnel into these areas. So it's definitely something that I think we should keep an eye on and try to make connections where we can. Part of me is very skeptical with the amount of capital being raised. Like I just have a hard time believing that it's going to find reasonable places to go. I think deal flow is already like hard to come by at this point. And so it should be interesting. Like, I think there's some stuff that I've already kind of been scratching my head at, like the $1 billion Luna Foundation Guard investment. I kind of hard to make sense of that to me. And I think my conclusion there is that there's just a lot of money that doesn't have a lot of great places to go. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some increasingly ridiculous deals kind of coming about.
For like DXdao, I think it's like two like takeaways. One, I think this kind of explains, or is one explanation for like why not as much like money has kind of come into DXdao or DXD, just because it is not the right vessel for this huge influx of money, completely independent of whether or not we like can build the stuff that these funds are trying to go found, right? Like I'm extremely confident that we can compete with kind of any company that's doing DAO services, that they're going to be funding. And of course, I think we're like much better qualified because we actually know what we're building there. So I think like the second takeaway for DXdao and DXD holders is like the competitors of DXdao will now all have higher valuations because anyone that's making DAO tooling is going to have a lot of VC money being thrown at them. They can't throw money at DXD right now, but for different, this is not investment advice, of course, but for other crypto investors, DXD, like that's really a great play because you can invest in like a DAO service provider company at a great valuation that basically like the VCs of the world can invest in. And we are going to be there. The projects that they're going to be investing in tooling are like not going to be as good as DXdao like already is now.
And capital doesn't buy you experience, and it
Right.
doesn't buy you competence. And we've seen already in the DAO tooling space, very well capitalized projects build in a closet for years and basically go nowhere when they launch, right? And so, I think DXdao is extremely well positioned due to being actual practitioners of decentralized governance relative to any other player in this space. And so, yeah, I think, it's exciting in some ways and in a lot of ways, but we'll see what happens with the money. Alan, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I was maybe I can add like a little bit of context. Some of my time is venture investing. I think you guys, you're pretty much spot on with there's like a surge of money that's coming in. I think about 5-6 months ago, I don't know, it's maybe like Chris Dixon, right, from A16Z, like his Web3 lectures have started propagating, and then every venture capital that is not even doing anything in crypto wanted to get in. And then, valuations basically started exploding. There's like a flood of money. Everybody's raising a shitload of money. And yeah, like as you're saying, I think, like some of these valuations are becoming, quite ridiculous. And yeah, I feel like this is sort of, it's the same thing that happened in like during the ICO stuff.
I was having, I've been saying Telegram, TON flashbacks.
Yeah, so many things like that. And I always see it as, during a bull market, there's times of like, kind of like very incremental improvements, right? So there's like Uniswap, and then there's SushiSwap on top of that. And then, there's like tiny sort of improvements in sort of, let's say, the DEX, right? And you could probably come up, like if you would go out and raise funds for Swapper for right now, I think we could, in theory, we could probably raise, like between $5 to $10 million as sort of like a product of its own, just because it actually has some features. It's on many chains, it has volume, and stuff like that. And because basically everybody wants in to these things. I want to, I think what you said about, there's like a lot of DAO tooling that's, being developed. And I see this a lot where people are sort of like philosophizing about how their governance will look like, but they've never actually been there. And even people who want to build like DAO toolings, they never actually experience it. They're like trying to build from like how they imagine things to be. And there's such an advantage here for basically everyone here in this group that knows essentially like just like the mechanics. It's sort of like the off-chain, right, mechanics of how the DAO works, so like how proposals are being made, or contributor guidelines and stuff like that. And I think, I tried to push for this a while back, but this is kind of like on me, for DXdao to sort of help other crypto startups incubate and become decentralized. And this means I don't know if we're there from like a product perspective, but once governance 2.0 comes out, like I would like to figure out a way, sort of like what we did with DMM back in the day, only this time not a scam. And like bringing these sort of projects in, helping them onboard to our governance system, and then DXdao could also get a portion of their tokens, which could also be like sort of like a revenue model. It's sort of we're helping them decentralize, and our expertise and what we've built so far it's so valuable. Like it's kind of crazy. And respect where respect is due for like friends with benefits and the propagation that they've done. It's you can't really call it a DAO. And yeah, I think people are looking at that as sort of like the holy grail of DAOs, which is, yeah, I don't really think so. So anyway, I think I went on a rant, but
Well, and I tied this back to some feedback we were giving about the Denver event, like in the past couple of weeks, which I think was the observation that a lot of other projects that are deep into building are also thinking hard about governance and out of a frustration with their own experiences, right? So I think that's something I've been trying to line up as some good follow-up conversations with projects like Element Finance, Radical, to XYZ, to talk about their governance and where there's some synergy there. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there just to work with the actual practitioners. But in addition, I think we should try to talk to these funds and kind of just at least offer, hey, like this is the experience that we have. We're happy to have conversations and maybe guide you where they're willing to listen, but totally agree that a lot of this building is sort of coming from like developing in a conference room and not on the ground where the action is actually happening.
Yeah. And I wanted to say that, the way Gnosis, I think we were sort of criticizing of Gnosis, right? With they're not really a DAO and it's very hierarchical there, where, the top two people are the ones making or calling the shots. And then what they've done
who do we not say that about, right?
Yeah. But what they've done with the cow swap, and this is also happening with the Gnosis Safe. I think this is an amazing model, and I don't know if we want to do this right now with spinning out maybe Carrot or Swapper, stuff like that. But this is an interesting model. And yeah, if we can do it to our own project, we could probably do this to other projects as well.
And that is actually
I think Swapper, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say we did it with Swapper, and I think all of DXdao products kind of have that path. And I think there's maybe an exciting project that I see that there's text and updates on that may be another project that might end up having something that can be spun out, and then that kind of creates a whole ecosystem. But I don't think that happens overnight, right? I think we're still Swapper is still decentralizing, DXdao is still governing it, but with the Swapper token and with kind of the moves we've been making, I think we're headed in that direction, and that's the ultimately the long game. I think we're is launching products and that are part of a product seed, that are part of an ecosystem, and I think DXdao is very well positioned for it because we already have all the tools in place to do that now, right? To build, to work with teams, to fund, to launch. So I think there's a lot of catch-up work that others need to do to be able to get where DXdao is already structured.
And the Swapper Guild is one of the main focuses for the governance team right now, and so that is coming. And exactly what Chris said.
Yeah. So I mean, this is gonna. I think this is gonna be a foundational moment, and if we succeed at this, then other projects are gonna. I hope that they will come and want to have our help in executing these type of processes and how to decentralize and how to, basically from experienced governance people, how to do governance.
And Gnosis has done some amazing stuff, not least of all being involved in launching DXdao, as well as migrating to Gnosis DAO. That's no small feat. I think they've actually done some incredible work there that is unparalleled in terms of making a real effort to decentralize. So even though at their core maybe the original Gnosis team is still sort of a company, I have no doubt they are, like us, decentralized maximalists that have done some really amazing work. That brings us to the hour, Keenan.
Boom! You gotta get some. That's your
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, guys. Some fun topics here at the end. More broadly, would like to talk to some more general ecosystem stuff here, as well as our regular kind of informational sections as well. We've kind of been starting that at the start of the calls, but maybe at the end there's some time as well. Thank you everyone for attending this week. You can find us same time, same place next week, Thursday, the 17th of March at 1600 UTC. We will see you then. Thank you for attending.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.